So, what exactly are the New Orleans Saints thinking? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget we're free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, who actually sponsors our entire NFL crossover Thursday program that we have going on. So if you're looking for a Super Bowl preview, you can find that over at Locked On Chiefs, Locked On Eagles, getting that ready for you. But Prize Picks is the sponsor there. They're getting you ready with everything that you need when it comes to daily fantasy. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players, choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their Prize Picks projections, and you could win up to 25 times your money back. And first-time users will get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 by using the promo code LOCKEDON at prizepicks.com or in the Prize Picks app. I'll tell you more about them later. Today's episode is a weird one, and we're live again because the New Orleans Saints just keep breaking news. And the first time it was because Ryan Nielsen ended up getting hired away. That was a down moment. Then it was that Sean Payton yesterday got traded away. The Saints recouped a first-round pick. That was an up moment, and we're right back down to a down moment today. So what we're breaking down is New Orleans Saints co-defensive coordinator Kris Richard and the Saints have parted ways, meaning the Saints will be looking for not only a new defensive coordinator, but effectively rebuilding their defensive staff going into 2023. And there could be more coaches on the way out as well. So we'll look at that first. We'll also take a look at how the Saints can find their next defensive coordinator and my top pick for who that would be. But first, what the heck happened here? This was not the issue for the New Orleans Saints. There was a lot of this that we looked at over the course of the season going into the offseason about how the Saints over on the defensive side, they were really well. They were set there. Everything was looking good. They had a defense that hadn't allowed more than 20 points in the last 8 games of the season. First time in franchise history that's happened since the Dome Patrol days, 92-93. And then all of a sudden, Kris Richard, Ryan Nielsen, they're getting job offers other places. They're getting job interviews other places, which we sort of expected that. But we thought, okay, well, look, if they get hired away, they get hired away. There's really nothing that the New Orleans Saints can do to stop that because them holding co-defensive coordinator roles means that the Saints can't block promotion. So if they were to get hired into a defensive coordinator role as a sole defensive coordinator, there's nothing that the Saints could have done there, but also nothing that the Saints would want to do there, right? Like, this is a franchise that has always been supportive of their coaches throughout their coaching staffs finding advancement in other places. So Ryan Nielsen getting hired away wasn't a particularly bad thing for the New Orleans Saints. Not a lot that they could do there. It wasn't a situation to where they let him walk away or anything like that. They just simply couldn't do anything. Now with Kris Richard, though, it's not a situation where he got hired somewhere. Yeah, he had interviews. He was interviewed by the Miami Dolphins, who did, then didn't, then totally did. No, trust me, dude, they 100% didn't type thing that's going on right now with Vic Fangio. Is he their defensive coordinator? Is he not? If not, then there's still a potential spot there available for Kris Richard. He also interviewed with the Carolina Panthers. Doesn't seem to be much traction there, but there could be now. Sean Payton hired in Denver. Could Kris Richard potentially be on, Sean Payton's list as a potential defensive coordinator out there? But until we even find any of that out, there wasn't a hiring when it came to Kris Richard. They just parted ways with him. So here's my best explainer for why this might have happened and what the heck did happen. What I would say here is that the only thing that makes sense is the New Orleans Saints and Kris Richard split ways because they went to Kris Richard and said, we want you to be the sole defensive coordinator, right? And then Kris Richard said, all right, cool, dope, I'll take that job, but you're going to have to let me call plays though. And then Dennis Allen, knowing that Dennis Allen wants to be in control of the defense, He's the play caller. He's the guy on that side of the ball. The Saints didn't have the play calling opportunity to offer to Kris Richard in a sole coordinator role or in spite of a sole coordinator role. And he said, no, I'd really like to go somewhere else and be able to pursue an opportunity to be a play caller again. He was a play caller in Dallas when he was the defensive coordinator there for a couple of years. Maybe that's what he wanted. And so the Saints and Kris Richard parted ways so that Kris Richard would have an opportunity to go out and land in a place as a sole defensive coordinator while also getting the opportunity to call plays. That's the only thing that I can think of that makes sense for why this would have happened. Other than that, you're offering Kris Richard the sole defensive coordinator position. He's saying yes, and he's staying in New Orleans. So there was something about the job that he didn't like. And so again, this isn't a situation to where the Saints look at him and say, okay, well, things weren't going well with you, so we're moving on from you. It's not a we're firing you kind of approach by the New Orleans Saints from the sound of it. It seems that instead it's really more like a, hey, we don't have the opportunity that you want. You want an opportunity elsewhere, so here's an opportunity for you to go and find that. And I get that, right? Again, Kris Richard is somebody that has been a defensive play caller before. He's done that. So to sort of see him take a step back after putting together 2 great seasons in New Orleans probably was not going to be an easy ask for him. So instead, he wants to go out, he wants to find that opportunity, pursue that opportunity, and find a place where he's going to be able to call the plays. That's really the only thing that I can think of that would remotely make sense. The thing that doesn't make sense is the idea that the Saints looked at their offense, looked at their defense, and said, yeah, we got to fix the defense, right? And make no adjustments at all over on the offensive side, with the exception of moving on from Dan Rochar, who was their tight end coach, was originally their offensive line coach, was moved to tight end coach, which tells you a little something there, and then got the run game coordinator position, and then was moved on from over the course of the offseason. So now the Saints are in a situation where not only are they looking for a tight end coach / run game coordinator, they're looking for a defensive coordinator, and they're also going to be looking for a defensive line coach and a secondary coach. According to Nick Underhill over at NewOrleans.football, it sounds like they're going to go with 1 defensive coordinator, 1 defensive line coach, 1 secondary coach. Sounds like they're going to make sure that that is an individual thing, which makes a lot of sense. The co-defensive coordinator structure was one that I was a little bit nervous about going into 2022. Now I didn't realize why fully until 2023, and here's one of the reasons why. So, no defensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints, which is such a weird thing, right? Because it's the one piece that worked for New Orleans. It's the one piece that was going well. Now, the sort of consolation here is that the guy that called the defensive plays, the guy that creates the defensive system under which the New Orleans Saints operate, is still very much in the building because he's your head coach. He's Dennis Allen. So now DA goes out. He finds himself a defensive coordinator that doesn't mind not calling plays, that can install the defense, run it the way that he wants to do that. And then you have the defensive line coach, secondary coach come in and bring a new perspective as well. But probably not the spot that you expected that there would be a change. Like if I told you at the end of the Week 18 game, the loss against the Carolina Panthers, that you're going to be looking for a new coordinator, either offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, by the time that February 1st rolls around, you probably would have thought I was talking about your offensive coordinator. That's not the case. It's a defensive coordinator. So who fills that role? Where do the New Orleans Saints go next? Well, there's one clear and obvious person that they should be pursuing, somebody that was already within the NFC South, somebody that they're very familiar with as well. I'll tell you who that is, and we'll take a look at a couple of other options as well as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The number one sports book in America is now partnered here with the Locked On Podcast Network, and we're super excited about that. And if you're new to FanDuel, it gets even better. They have so many great features that help make sports betting so much fun. If you download the FanDuel app right now, you're going to be able to place your Super Bowl 57 bet with a no sweat first bet. That's going to allow you to get up to $3,000 $1,000 back in bonus bets if your bet doesn't win. And you know what that means? That means that there's no such thing as losing in this situation. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to the spreads to player props, same game parlays, who's going to score the first touchdown, the color of the Gatorade that's dumped on the game-winning coach, the Super Bowl game-winning coach, all of that. You can get in on every bit of it for betting Christmas, as we call the Super Bowl season, over at the FanDuel Sportsbook app, which is safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/locked on, and you can claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. No defensive coordinator in New Orleans. Ryan Nielsen's headed to Atlanta. Kris Richard is headed elsewhere. So what will the New Orleans Saints do at defensive coordinator? Well, thankfully, they don't have to go very far to find the perfect replacement. Appreciate you as always making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to also stick around later on today as we're doing a live episode here at 8 p.m. Central Time tonight, as well as on Thursday night. We're going to have a live episode for you over at Locked On NFL Draft. Keep me up to date with everything going on at Senior Bowl practice. If you want to hear about some of those Senior Bowl candidates, competitors, prospects, all that, make sure you're heading over to Locked On NFL Draft later today. All right, so the New Orleans Saints are without a defensive coordinator. As we mentioned before, that's something that is very, very surprising considering the way that the 2022 season went. If you were thinking about a change at coordinator, defensive side of the ball is not the one that you probably thought you were going to see a change. Instead, you probably expected the offensive side, just like many of us. That is not the case, however. With Ryan Nielsen on his way to Atlanta, Kris Richard on his way elsewhere, the New Orleans Saints can stay within the division if they want to find their perfect replacement. My recommendation: call Steve Wilks right now. Steve Wilks is one of the most highly respected defensive coaches available on the market right now in today's NFL. And listen, he's somebody that deserves the opportunity to call plays. Let's get that out of the way. That is 100% the case. He deserves to be in control of your defense. And very likely, you hire somebody like Steve Wilks, you get him for a year, and then he gets an opportunity elsewhere to do what it is that he deserves, which is probably to be a head coach. So he's somebody that comes in and very likely gets an opportunity right off the bat. This is the Los Angeles Rams going out and signing some big time free agent for a year, or trading a bunch of draft picks so they can get somebody that they knew they weren't going to be able to extend anyway. This is an F them picks, F them money, F the defensive coordinator position move beyond all of this. But he is somebody that's going to be able to help you win games. So you get to bring somebody like Steve Wilks in, who has enormous amounts of respect, is a phenomenal culture builder, is a player's coach, understands the game, knows how to translate it to players in a locker room that's getting younger and younger and younger on the New Orleans Saints defensive side. Yes, Cam Jordan's going to be 33. Yes, Demario Davis is in his 30s. Yes, those guys are, up there in terms of quote unquote older veterans. I say as a 32-year-old, but when you look at the rest of the defensive staff, the people that make up the defensive personnel and that are the names that you think about when you think about the New Orleans Saints defense, it's Marshawn Lattimore, it's Alontae Taylor, it's Paulson Adebo, it's Caden Ellis, hopefully, it's Peyton Turner, it's Carl Granderson with his potential, with his recent rise in terms of his development. It's the young guys that end up being the foundational players for your team. You could even throw in Marcus May there. You go out and you find another safety in the draft because you're going to need to invest in that position anyway. They have to rebuild their defensive line because they ain't got a single defensive tackle, interior defender at all on contract in 2023. So you bring in somebody that's able to translate the game for players young and old, and that is a culture builder that everyone respects, and then you're able to build your team not only through the playbook, but through the culture. And that is something that separated the New Orleans Saints in years past. It's something that could help to separate them again. Now, you're going to need to find more help, right? You're going to have to find a secondary coach. You're going to have to find a defensive line coach. Your secondary coach may already be in the building in Cory Robinson. Cory Robinson is here in Mobile. I'm at the Senior Bowl, by the way. It's hard to pay attention to what's going on at the Senior Bowl when the New Orleans Saints keep trading coaches, firing coaches, and getting coaches hired away, but that's fine. We're here in Mobile. So is Cory Robinson. He's working with the safeties as a part of the defensive backs coaching tandem with one of the teams here. And That's a place that we've seen Cory Robinson heading for a long time since he came over as a defensive assistant from Maryland. He worked with Kris Richard, got better and better. I've talked to the guy. He sounds like Kris Richard when he talks. You bring him, you let him be somebody that comes from the same ilk as a guy like Kris Richard, that comes from the same ilk as a guy like Aaron Glenn, and then all of a sudden you don't miss a beat in terms of translating the game for the players, doing what matters to get the best out of them once they get on the field. Cory Robinson does that incredibly well. So you tandem, you put together a guy like Cory Robinson, a young guy in a secondary coach position, working with as a position coach, and you pair him up with one of the most respected defensive minds in the NFL, like Steve Wilks. You got to go and find a defensive line coach as well. There are a couple of those guys out there that you're going to be able to find. Ed Donatel was just moved on from over in Minnesota. He's a defensive line mastermind kind of guy. You bring somebody like him in, preferably somebody that has some defensive coordinator chops, but hasn't really been able to sustain that for a long enough time, which is kind of who Kris Richard was as well. Helped to bring up the Legion of Boom, went over to Dallas, became a defensive coordinator there, did that for a couple of years, left football for a year, and then came to New Orleans. And what did he do? He helped to turn around and develop guys massively quickly, like Paulson Adebo in his first year, like Alontae Taylor in his first year. He had a huge hand in who Marshawn Lattimore became in a contract year. He had played a huge part in Tyrann Mathieu's performance from week 1 to week 18, vastly different. Unfortunately, Marcus May couldn't stay on the field in 2022. You saw what he did with Marcus Williams, turning him around. Kris Richard was somebody that had that teaching background, that had that defensive coordinator background. Go and find that person to come in from outside the organization to be your defensive line coach, and it makes a big time difference for you. So those are some places where the New Orleans Saints could find their new defensive staff. And of course, there are other names out there that we'll continue to break down as we continue on throughout the week here on Locked On Saints. Coming up next, let's take a look at what other coaches the New Orleans Saints could see exit, because there's an offensive coach that's getting some more attention from across the division, and I don't think that attention is going to go anywhere anytime soon, and he's a piece you do not want to lose if you're a New Orleans Saints fan. We'll tell you who that is as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy, and in fact, daily fantasy made the only way that it really should have been made in the first place. None of this playing against mystery lineups for a mystery cut of a mystery pot of money that you're never really certainly sure about. This is super easy. It's you versus the projections, you versus the house, you and your knowledge of your favorite players, favorite teams, favorite leagues, favorite sports. All you have to do is choose whether or not the players that you love are going to come out at more or less than the Prize Picks projections. That's it. My favorite one to do is actually golf. I love the golf ones. It's simple. Are they going to have more or less than 4.5 birdies in this round? You choose more or less. You choose more. They get 5. Bam. You can win up to 25 times your money down back in terms of your return on that, as long as you put that down for 2 to 6 players. That's all that it takes. It takes about 60 seconds to put your entry in, which means that by the time I'm done running my mouth here, you could have put in like 30 different entries. So make sure you go and check them out today. You can do so by downloading the Prize Picks app or by heading over to prizepicks.com today to sign up for free and play daily fantasy sports. First-time listeners and first-time users are going to be able to receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 by simply using the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. You put down $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. You know how numbers work. They're a lot of fun. Don't forget to enter that promo code Locked On to sign up for your instant deposit match of $100 over at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app today. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're taking a look at other coaches that could be on the way out for the New Orleans Saints. They've already moved on from Dan Rochar, who was their tight end coach as well as run game coordinator. Ryan Nielsen, who was their co-defensive coordinator, defensive line coach. He's on his way to take over the sole DC role in Atlanta. And then now the Saints and Kris Richard have parted ways. And that might not be the end of it when it comes to where the New Orleans Saints could be headed next and what coaches could potentially be on the way out. The big name to watch is going to be quarterback coach and passing game coordinator Ronald Curry. Ronald Curry is somebody who has had his name around in coaching circles for a long time now. He's a dual sport guy that came into the NFL as a quarterback out of UNC, one of the greatest high school athletes to ever play the game, one of the most fun college athletes to ever watch play the game, became a wide receiver, got into coaching, spent time with the New Orleans Saints coaching wide receivers, then coaching quarterbacks and being the passing game coordinator. Now, where is he off to next? There's a good chance that his next role is that of an offensive coordinator. And we've already started to see a little bit of this, okay? Ronald Curry was brought in by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to interview for their open offensive coordinator position, in which they let go of Byron Leftwich not too long ago. If the New Orleans Saints were to lose Ronald Curry, then that would put them in a situation so they would have to go out there and find a quarterback coach. Now, they could reunite with Joe Lombardi, who hasn't been able to be a successful offensive coordinator in the NFL in his 2 stints with Detroit as well as with Los Angeles, but was a great quarterback coach for the New Orleans Saints. There could be a reunion there. They could find another quarterback coach. But the thing that you're thinking about with Ronald Curry is the future. You're not thinking about the present. They've been grooming this guy to become an offensive coordinator, whether it be with their franchise or another franchise, for years now. And wouldn't you love to be able to see them cash in on his talents as opposed to a division rival? We are operating in a timeline right now which might be at its absolute darkest, because we could be seeing Ryan Nielsen leaving the New Orleans Saints for the Atlanta Falcons, Kris Richard being parting ways with the New Orleans Saints and could end up in Carolina with the Carolina Panthers. And then we could top that with just the grandest little cherry on top, which is Ronald Curry headed over as offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Losing 3 coordinators, losing 3 coaches, 2 coordinator roles with your 3 division rivals. Not great, Bob. Not the way you want to go about business. So this is the reality that we're in right now when it comes to the New Orleans Saints. And as I said, when the New Orleans Saints came out and said, hey, we're sticking around with Pete Carmichael here, everything's going to be Gucci, don't you worry about it, look the other way. What did I say? I don't blame anyone for having a little bit of lacking confidence when it comes to what the New Orleans Saints have and don't have going into 2023. And it's up to the New Orleans Saints themselves to prove to you that they're making the right decisions. This Kris Richard decision is absolutely one of those. Unless, like I mentioned, it came down to the play calling idea to where Kris Richard wanted to be able to call plays. The Saints couldn't provide him with that opportunity, so they're allowing him to go out and get that opportunity. So if that's the case, obviously, Ross will shut his mouth. But if that is not the case, then you have every right at this point to be questioning a little bit about what's going on here and waiting for them to prove to you that they're right. And until they do that, I understand all the questions. I can't answer all of them, but I 100% understand all the questions. So it's like my old Chris Rock drop that I used to use, right? Like I'm not saying I agree, but I understand. So it is one of those days for the New Orleans Saints, right? And one of those days for you as New Orleans Saints fans. You had the ups, we've had the downs, and we're right back into the downs a little bit, and then we'll see. We'll see where the New Orleans Saints go here. But this is a key and very, very important hire now for the New Orleans Saints, how they address their defensive staff. Because again, the defense is what won them games in 2022. The defense is expected to be the strongest part of this roster going into 2023, especially with massive quarterback questions waiting around the corner. The Saints need that defense. So thankfully, the person that is the architect of that defense, Dennis Allen, still there, still calling plays. That's a good thing. But when it comes down to losing guys like Kris Richard and Ryan Nielsen, those types of, I almost said players, but those types of coaches and that type of talent is very, very, very hard to find an immediate replacement for or even replace over the course of years. So we'll see. We'll see how it all goes. But hey, as long as they call up Steve Wilks, Ross is a happy camper, and I hope you can be too. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, we'll finally hopefully be able to talk about some of the Senior Bowl prospects, unless something else happens with the New Orleans Saints coaching staff as the intrigue continues on and on and on. Now that the Saints have a first-round pick, who is the best standout here at the Senior Bowl that the New Orleans Saints could invest that first-round pick in, and why a local standout could be raising his stock to the point where the Saints could be looking at him in early day 2. I'm going to break all that down for you as we continue on with another episode of Locked On Saints tomorrow. Appreciate you, as always, y'all, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to also go and check out Locked On NFL, where you can get everything you need around the NFL in less than 30 minutes. I appreciate y'all, as always, making me a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. And as always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you have any other questions around your New Orleans Saints, please make sure you are checking us out here on the Locked On Podcast Network. But don't forget also to follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.